I stood in front of the mirror, fastening my necklace, and told myself tonight might be different. My parents had finally reached out after months of clipped calls and stiff nods across the board table. Dinner at the estate, just the three of us. No audience. For a moment, I let myself believe it meant truce, maybe even a chance to be their daughter again instead of their opponent. I slid into my coat when my phone buzzed. 3 words glared on the screen. Call me immediately. No greeting. No context. Corwin. My stomach knotted. I dialed. He picked up on the first ring, voice tight and urgent. Elone. They filed the petition this morning. Emergency conservatorship. Thaddeus and Iris are claiming you're mentally incompetent to run the company. The air vanished. My coat slipped from my hands and hit the hardwood with a soft thud. What? Witness statements. Affidavits. It's not talk anymore. They want legal control. The world tilted. I heard my mother's sweet invitation, in my head, let's talk about the future, and saw my father's thin, polite smile at the last meeting. I thought that meant progress. It meant prep work. They planned this, I whispered, as realization settled like a trap snapping shut. Yes, Corwin said. They're moving fast. The lemon tarts I bought on the way home sat in a box on the counter, suddenly ridiculous. A peace offering for parents who had already decided to erase me. I sank onto the bench by the door, pulse hammering, the phone burning in my hand. That dinner wasn't an invitation. It was an ambush. I could still hear my mother's voice from 3 days ago, warm in a way I hadn't heard for months. Honey, let's talk about the future. Just dinner. It had sounded like a careful stitch through something torn. I wanted so badly to believe her that I stopped by the bakery near my old school for those lemon tarts she used to slip onto my plate when I was a kid. Now, with Corwin's warning thrumming in my ears, the memory soured. That gentle tone had been rehearsed. They didn't want my company. They wanted my compliance. I let other moments surface, small cuts I'd shrugged off. My father cutting me off mid-sentence at a quarterly, finishing my point as if I hadn't spoken. My mother's light laugh in front of the staff. Elone forgets things lately, but don't we all? Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile. It wasn't harmless. It was steady erosion. I called it tension, age, family dynamics. I convinced myself. I was imagining it because the truth, that the people who raised me were sanding down my credibility in public while slipping me crumbs of affection in private, was too painful to hold. I opened the bakery box. The tarts looked perfect. Golden crusts, sugared tops. I shut the lid with shaking hands and pushed it away. They weren't sweet anymore. They were proof of how willingly I walked into their setup. The phone lay in. My lap as Corwin's warning echoed. I couldn't afford to be the daughter who wanted peace. Not now. I had to become someone else entirely because sentiment had just turned into ammunition. In Corwin's office, he slid a folder across the desk. It felt heavier than paper. I opened it with stiff hands. Petition for emergency conservatorship of Elone Marcellus. The words knocked the air from my lungs. I made myself read every line. Erratic leadership, emotional decline, poor judgment and pressure, witness statements from people I'd once trusted, claims that I forgot key dates, dismissed data, relied on emotion. The language was clinical, but I could hear my parents behind every sentence. Corwin waited, then said, "They didn't do this alone. 2 investors signaled support. They want a familiar name. Your parents can reassure them. Stability over vision." I closed the folder, fingers denting the cardboard. So they trade me for appearances, their own daughter. His voice stayed level. If the court grants temporary control, they can freeze your access by week's end. This is not theoretical. It's happening. The bitterness rose thick. I thought of late nights, missed holidays, steady climbs through recessions, only to be called unfit not from care for me, but fear for themselves. I felt something shift. This wasn't disappointment anymore. It was survival. I steadied my voice. Then we fight. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun slipped behind the skyline. The petition kept echoing. The house hummed with the refrigerator's steady breath while my mind replayed memories I'd tried to bury. A board member had leaned toward me last quarter. "Your father mentioned you've been overwhelmed. Maybe slow down. I'd laughed it off. Now it landed differently. My parents had been feeding doubts to ears eager for an easier story. More fragments surfaced, an associate offering to clarify my own projections, a department head pausing before answering me, waiting to see if Iris or Thaddeus would speak first. I had brushed it aside, called it fatigue. My eyes drifted to the bakery box. The tarts looked perfect and useless, not sweet reminders of childhood, proof that nostalgia had blinded me. I'd marched into their trap with a smile, arms full of peace offerings while they sharpened knives behind closed doors. A cold thought pressed hard against my ribs. What if the board believed them? What if years of precision could be erased by tidy affidavits and a rehearsed story? I pressed my palms to the table and stood. Fear is dangerous, but denial is worse. If they were willing to break me piece by piece, I would find the seams in their armor too. By Thursday afternoon, I walked back into the office. The walls felt different, like even the glass held whispers. I kept my chin up. Their petition cracked something, but it hadn't broken me. I was pulling reports for Corwin when a soft knock sounded. Rowan Vale, a junior accountant barely out of school, hovered in my doorway. He was usually quiet, careful. Now his shoulders were tight, eyes flicking toward the hall. He held a folded paper like it might burn him. "Miss Marcellus," he whispered, "you should see this." I took it. His fingers trembled. "Please don't say it came from me." He backed out and was gone before I could answer. I opened the printout and felt my breath leave. An internal email, subject, pre-transition support. The body was short. Once we assume interim control, bonuses will be distributed accordingly. Signed, Iris Marcellus. I read it twice, then a third time. The words cut sharper with each pass. Interim control. Not if, but when. Bonuses dangled for loyalty. This wasn't concern for my health or the company. It was bribery in polite font. I pressed the page flat, pulse pounding. All this time I told myself I was overthinking, that the slights were accidents. Here was black and white evidence, premeditated corruption, and quiet, overlooked Rowan had brought it to me. He could have stayed silent, safer, maybe even richer if those bonuses were real. He didn't. He saw the truth and handed it over with shaking hands. Something in me steadied. If a young accountant could stand up, I had no excuse to falter. I slid the email into a folder labeled Evidence. The fight had shifted. My parents weren't just undermining me. They were buying their future. I had the thread to unravel it. I didn't wait for another summons. I drove to the estate and walked into the study. They sat by the fire. For a second, they looked like the parents I remembered, my father's heavy brow, my mother's careful smile. But the words that followed belonged to strangers. "Elo," Iris began, voice gentle enough to pass for kindness. "We never wanted this to be adversarial. You've done incredible things, but everyone has their time. We want to make the transition graceful for you." Thaddeus folded his hands. "Better to leave before anyone starts asking questions. We can keep this quiet. Let you step down with dignity. Mercy, daughter. Mercy." The word was ice. I kept my voice steady. "You filed a petition behind my back. You told the court I'm incompetent. That's not mercy, that's a mask. And I have the receipts." Their faces shifted. Iris's smile flickered. Thaddeus's jaw locked. They didn't admit anything. They just shared a look. The same united front they'd shown the world for years. I didn't stay. Anything else I said would give them ground. I left, my heels echoing against marble, my pulse steadier than it had been in weeks. Back in my office, I combed through financials with a sharper eye. Numbers lit up like embers. A $12,000 payment to a strategic advisory firm no one knew. Another $8,500 to a consultant abroad with no reports, no deliverables, no record of work. I stared at the screen. The figures screamed louder than words. Fraud wasn't suspicion now. It was logged and time-stamped. They weren't just trying to take me down with a story, they were using company money to fund it. With every document I saved, the facade of mercy cracked, leaving only cold strategy. By the weekend, my office looked like a bunker. Binders and folders covered every surface, labeled in block letters. medical evaluations, revenue growth, client retention, staff commendations. I built the wall of evidence brick by brick, the way I built the company. Patiently, precisely, no shortcuts. First, I laid out the clean medicals. 2 specialists, signed and current. No cognitive decline, no impairment, no reason to doubt my fitness to lead. Next came 3 years of revenue records, charts that don't lie. Steady growth, healthy, margins, real expansion. On another table, I spread client contracts and handwritten notes of thanks. Their signatures proved my leadership was not ceremonial. When fatigue pressed in, I queued up last year's keynote video. 40 minutes without a single note, every figure crisp. I remembered the standing ovation. I didn't watch for pride, I watched for clarity. That woman on the stage was still me. Late that night, Corwin loosened his tie and scanned the stacks. "This is strong," he said, tapping a binder. "But expect staged anecdotes and coached witnesses. Be ready for noise." I nodded, sliding another file into place. Let them try. Numbers don't shake when questioned. I stood back and looked at what I'd built. The lemon tarts, the memories, the hunger for reconciliation. Ashes. What remained was my arsenal. The courtroom would be next. It wasn't survival anymore. It was war. The courtroom smelled faintly of polish and cold air, the kind of room where truth should cut sharper than sentiment. I walked in steady, dressed in black. Across the aisle, my parents had staged a tableau. Iris wore cream, soft and composed, her face arranged into maternal calm. Thaddeus sat straight, a dignified patriarch burdened by duty. Their lawyer spoke with practiced sorrow. "This is not animosity," he told the judge. "This is concern. Loving parents watching their daughter. Decline, erratic decisions, emotional instability. They acted from necessity, not ambition." I kept my hands folded and listened to their polished fiction. The undertone was obvious, pity disguised as truth. Then Corwin stood, no theatrics. He slid binders across the bench. "Your Honor, the respondent has been evaluated by 2 specialists within 18 months. Both confirm no cognitive decline." He opened, stamped, signed reports. Another binder. 3 years of revenue, retention, expansion, benchmarked above industry standards. The room rustled as charts and contracts moved forward. Finally, he set down a stack of financial records. His voice sharpened. "Here is documentation of unauthorized payments. $12,000 to a shell firm, $8,500 to a consultant abroad. These transfers were approved by the petitioners and disguised as company expenses." The judge flipped pages, then looked up. His voice was even, but it hit like a hammer. "You accuse your daughter of incompetence while using her company's funds against her." A low gasp passed through the gallery. Iris faltered. Thaddeus opened his mouth, stammered, and stopped. Their careful stagecraft began to fracture. The floor shifted beneath them. I felt my spine set, straight and sure. The judge's ruling cut clean, petition dismissed. The story they had rehearsed for months died in one sentence. But the gavel didn't just protect me, it turned on them. The court ordered a review of their financial conduct. The very fraud they tried to bury now dragged into daylight. By evening, the board called an emergency session. I sat at the head of the table with Corwin beside me. Members shifted in their seats, papers tight in their hands. Calmly, Corwin laid out the evidence. Iris's loyalty test emails, the shell payments, the promised bonuses for silence. Each document slid across polished wood like a verdict. When the discussion ended, there was no debate left to pretend. The vote was swift and unanimous. Thaddeus and Iris were stripped of all authority. Their names came off rolls they once wore like crowns. For the first time, they had no stage, no script, no power. Across the table, Iris leaned forward, voice trembling just enough to sound almost sincere. "We only wanted what was best." I met her eyes. "You wanted what was yours. I built what was mine." She flinched. Silence settled over the room. The board turned to me, waiting. The moment that once terrified me now felt earned. The seat they tried to seize was gone. The work of leading was back where it belonged. Signed the removal papers without hesitation, knowing the next battle had already begun. 2 weeks later, I walked into the boardroom at 9 sharp. Every seat was filled. The air held a quiet current. When I stepped in, the members rose, not out of pity, but respect. I took the head seat, the chair that used to sit heavy with doubt. This time it fit. I let the room settle. This company is my legacy, I said. It was built on discipline, on endurance, on choices that were never easy, but always deliberate. From today forward, betrayal has consequences, family or not. No one argued. No one looked away. Nods moved around the table, some slow, some relieved, as if the ground finally steadied. For years, I'd tried to prove my worth, even to those who should have seen it first. Now I didn't have to prove anything. The evidence, the courtroom, the vote, they already had. The meeting ended without speeches or applause. Just clarity. I walked the bright corridor to the corner office my parents once occupied. The blinds were drawn, the desk was cleared, the room sat emptied of them. I paused long enough to recognize the emptiness for what it was, not loss, but release. Then I kept going. I didn't need their approval anymore. What they tried to erase, I reclaimed. What they tried to own, I defended. And what I carried, out with me, was stronger than inheritance. Legacy finally had become mine alone.